Hey guys, this week on Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, I am joined by none other than the Chuck Adams, and we talk about his multiple world records that he just received at the past Pope and Young convention just last week. We also talk a whole lot about mental fortitude and what it takes mentally and physically to kill big animals and staying in the game even when things get hard, and how to do that. Some tips and tricks to stay mentally clear and keep yourself in the game. We also talk about the unnecessary amount of money that people spend on gear and how by simplifying our gear and keeping those things cheaper, we can go on more hunts, therefore killing bigger animals. Guys, it's a phenomenal episode. We talk about a whole lot of things. We even talk about tuning your arrows and how Chuck tunes his arrows. He shares some really cool tips about how he tunes his arrows and the importance of Pope and Young and the conservation that they do for us as bow hunters. Guys, as always, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at ScentLock. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did.
Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, where hunters new and old come to learn and find inspiration from stories of hunts gone by. Everyone is welcome to enjoy the outdoor way of life, and there is no better time to start than right now. So let's head into the great outdoors with your host, Dylan Ray.
Guys, my goal is to never be the next, mountain athlete that's constantly training and who's the most jacked guy you've ever seen. And they say, you got to be this way to hunt. That's not my goal. My goal is to be the most successful hunter that I can be. And I found out in 2018 that involves working out. I went on a Western hunt and I got my tail kicked. And I decided in that moment that I would never let my physical abilities stop me from being successful while hunting. And so I got home and I got to work, losing about 50 pounds. I then met one of my mentors, Harvey Ebers, who is 82 years old, and he still crushes it while he's hunting. And when I asked him what he attributes that to, he quickly said, resistance training, because he's still at age 82, resistance trains, and he does that so that he can continue to hunt. And so, guys, I'm a firm believer in training to be a better hunter. That doesn't mean, again, that I'm going out and running a marathon a day. That doesn't mean that I spend 4 hours in the gym a day. I train so I can be a better hunter. I quickly fell in love with a product called Ready Nutrients. Ready Nutrients is built by outdoorsmen for outdoorsmen. And what this is going to do is it's going to create opportunities for me to be the best in the gym and get the most out of the gym that I can, so that I can then in turn be the best in the woods and on the mountain. So guys, if you do any kind of training whatsoever, and if you're a hunter, again, I encourage you to do some sort of training, even if it's mobility training, even if it's just a little bit of shoulder work, knee work, ankle work, just to stay healthy and fluid for the mountain. But if you do any kind of training, I would highly encourage you to check out Ready Nutrients at liveready.com. Whether you're looking for a pre-workout to get the most out of the gym, whether you're looking at their BCAAs and hydration blends to recover on the mountain, whether you're looking to get better sleep so that you can, again, be better on the mountain. All of these things were brought to mind because they were built, again, to help you perform in the woods. So, guys, I would highly encourage you to check out Ready Nutrients at liveready.com. So the next time that you hit the mountains, you will be ready. All right, Chuck. So before we jump into all these awards and all these world records and everything that took place this last week at the Pope and Young convention, let's take a minute to note this wasn't just last year. So the Pope and Young recording period is for 2 years. So everything that Chuck was honored for and everything that Chuck received was either harvested in 2021 or 2022. It was not just this past season. So I just wanted to make that note. But Chuck, obviously, you were awarded new world records. Most people will never hear that in their lifetime. Most people will never hear you were awarded a world record, much less records. So So congratulations, Chuck. I know I got to tell you in person, but congratulations. They are well deserved, and I could not be happier for you.
Thank you, Dylan. I appreciate it.
So, and you, I believe I heard you mention at one point, I believe I heard you say that the Sitka blacktail non-typical velvet was your best trophy yet, which is sitting right beside you. It's a beautiful
Yeah,
deer. But you regard that as your best trophy ever.
I do, Dylan. I love hunting Sitka deer. I've been hunting Sitka deer since the early 1980s. I believe I have over 40 Pope and Young Sitkas in the book at this point, somewhere right at it. And I've never seen a deer with this much bone on its head. As a matter of fact, this deer ended up uh, having the highest net score of any Sitka deer ever recorded in Pope and Young in any category. So when I saw this deer and thought it was the biggest I'd ever seen, I was sort of right about that.
Yeah. You were right that it was the biggest deer anybody had ever seen. Now, I
Right.
remember having heard stories, and well, first off, that was not the first deer of the trip you killed that would have broke the world record, which is just mind blowing to me. So walk us through kind of that whole trip. So this was 2022. Was it August?
August 2022, I arrived in the town of Kodiak, Alaska on the last day of July.
And you had a rough bout to begin with. Like you didn't even get to hunt much, correct?
Correct. I figured by the end of August, and I was there right through the end of August, 60% of my time was spent in the tent with dense fog, driving rain, wind so heavy that my 100-mile rated tent had 3 rips in the fly at the end of that month. It's the
Wow.
worst weather anybody I know on Kodiak had ever seen.
Wow. How do you even before we get into the actual killing of the animals, which I know everybody wants to hear, how do you and Chuck, you're the king of this. Like if I can say it myself, you're the king of this. You're the king of just absolutely working hard. Like no matter how bad it sucks, no matter how bad it gets, like you're the king of working hard. How do you even stay mentally in the game at that point? Like you've got to just be ready to pack up and go home.
Well, I've been accustomed to bad weather on Kodiak Island since I started hunting there, because it's pretty commonplace in August, and it gets worse in September and October and November, and colder too. But I just take a lot of paperback books. I read 20 thick paperback books on that trip during the month of August last year. And thank
Wow.
goodness for that. I might have gone crazy without those books. I had Stephen King. I had several other prominent authors, and I just kept reading when I couldn't do anything else.
Wow. You know, and that's the kind of mental fortitude that a lot of hunters just don't have. Myself included. I mean, my father actually you did something really special for my dad. I got my dad a bear grizzly, and I FaceTimed him and I said, "Hey, Dad, I got you a new bow." And of course, he was already incredibly excited at that point. But and then I panned the camera over and I said, "Oh, I'm going to have this cat here sign it for you." And then he just loses his mind. But so thank you so much for doing that for my dad. But um,
Sure.
he told you on the phone. He said, "Chuck, I used to want to be just like you." But now I've read your book and I realized, dude, I don't want to be anything like you because you work your tail off. And so that is true. A lot of people want to find success. A lot of people want to kill the big animals, but not everybody wants to hang out in a tent for, 30 days with nothing to do.
Well, it was the worst 1 month I've ever spent on Kodiak. I can tell you that. Normally, it's less than 50% of the time you're stuck with bad weather, so you can't hunt. But even with 60% of bad weather, there were days when I'd wake up at dawn and the sky was clear, and I knew I had a very long Alaskan day to race around in glass and try to find
Yeah.
a big deer. So it was worth it.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it was absolutely worth it. You broke the world record twice. What was so just walk me through that whole hunt. 3 animals, you killed 3 giants. Walk me through that whole hunt.
Okay, well, I did arrive in Kodiak the last day of July. Got organized in town like I always do. Went to Safeway and bought my groceries, and I had it planned for the whole month. And I shipped up some gear, including my bows, before I left on the trip, because it's hard to get the stuff up on the airlines anymore, excess baggage fees and whatnot. So I got organized, flew out to my secret honey hole. And I will say, I've hunted Kodiak 18 times, and there's one spot, I've been all over that island. There's one spot, and only one spot, where I had seen more than one non-typical deer. And as you know, Pope and Young only instituted the non-typical categories a few years ago. So I was passing up non-typicals in that area. Matter of fact, I sneaked up on one years ago that I photographed at close range that I passed up. I went back and reviewed that photo the other day. That deer probably would have scored, net scored 101, 102 non-typical. I just walked away from him because there was no category, and I knew all those extra points would be deductions. So I went. I thought, there's a non-typical category in velvet now with Pope and Young. I'm going to go back to that spot and snoop around and see if I can find a big non-typical, because I knew the world record non-typical that Jack Frost shot years ago was beatable. So I went in there and I hunted for 10 days. I didn't find anything but one small deer with a few extra points off the base. And on the 11th day, I came around a corner in the morning and there were 2 bucks, and one of them was a nice non-typical, a 2x2 with quite a few extra points coming off the base. And I knew it had more than the 5 inches of non-typical required by Pope and Young. So I went after him, made 3 different stalks from 3 different angles, and ultimately got really close to his buddy, but shot over the top of his buddy and shot him at longer range. And that deer green scored right at 97 inches, which was about 8 inches higher than Jack Frost's world record. So I was doing backflips at that point.
Yeah.
And
well, little did you know that was the smallest of the trip.
It was the second smallest of the trip. I actually broke the world record 3 times, and that one on the 17th. After I was in the tent most of the next 6-7 days, but on the 17th I found a deer. It was also every non-typical I've seen in this one area. It's all genetic. They're big forking horns, every one I've ever seen, with extra points near the bottom. And this deer was one of those. I knew he wasn't quite as big as the first one, but he looked pretty good to me. So I went after him, sneaked within 40 yards across a big canyon, took a couple hours, and I shot him at 40 yards. He ended up green scoring about 94 net. And then the weather really hit me. From the 11th through about the 20th, I was in my tent with just horrible, unhuntable weather. And during that time, my old buddy Ron Najalik, who I went with and who lives in Cody here with me, in Cody, Greta and I live out of ways, but he's here close by. I got him on the satellite phone because I was tired of reading books and wanted to talk to somebody. And he said, I heard that Jim Willems, the former president of Pope and Young, said on Bowsite that Bob Amin might have shot a non-typical on Kosciuszko Island in southern Alaska that scores around 104. And I thought, boy, here I've got 2 deer that break the world record, and now sounds like there's one that's better, because Jim Willems knows what he's doing. He knows how to score deer, obviously. But I actually sent out I was posting on social media through Greta the whole time, and I sent out a post saying, records are meant to be broken. Congratulations, Bob. Sounds like you got a good one. And then the weather finally cleared, like the 21st or 22nd of August. And I started hunting hard again. And the hunting days up there are like 18 hours long.
Yeah.
So I covered a lot of ground, looked at a lot of deer. It was getting toward the end of my trip. I was due to go out on the 29th of August by bush plane back to Kodiak. And I was late evening going up a hill, and I looked off to my left, and here's the biggest non-typical deer I'd ever seen, the one you see off my left shoulder here. And make a long story short, it was about a 2-hour stalk. I ended up crawling through tundra humps, had a doe and fawn almost step on me, and a little spike buck almost step on me. But finally, that deer stood up out of his bed, and I shot him at 33 yards. And I was
Wow.
blown away by the diameter of the bases and the length of points. And again, a big forked horn with just lots of extra points down low.
Wow. You give hope to all the guys like me who
And,
like
that,
to kill
and, I,
forking
and I
horns.
also had a grin on my face because I was getting down to the point where I might have shot a big forked horn to fill my third tag with a medium poking young buck at that point. But things worked out, and Bob Amin's big deer is now number 2 in the record book for non-typical velvet with a score a little over 101. And mine scored 117 and 7/8 after ball measuring, which
Now,
is
was it
32%.
ever?
Yeah, 32% bigger than the old world record.
Which is the largest that a world record has ever been broken by
That's what you and
percentage.
Jason told me. That's what you and Jason told me in the Pope and Young podcast a while back, and I had thought about it till then. But you're right.
That is absolutely insane. So, for those who couldn't follow what happened, in one hunt, Chuck broke the world record 3 times. But Bob Amin also broke that current standing world record. What was the current world record while Chuck was on that hunt? So Chuck, how it all played out, Chuck now has the 1, 3, and 4, right? And Bob has the second.
That's correct. That's correct.
Which is just crazy.
I think when I go back, which I'm planning to do this year, I think I can find another non-typical in that area because the genetics are strong. I've found shed antlers that are non-typical in that area. Some folks think these are stags, but they're not. They're fully viable deer, and I know they're breeding. 2 of my bucks had the same tooth space on the same side of the head that was blank, and they hadn't lost their teeth. They just didn't grow one. That tells me the genetics are pretty intertwined in this area.
Yeah. I've not ever had the pleasure of meeting Bob Amin, but I hear he's just a blacktail stud. And I've heard that. But then when you walk through that trophy display at Pope and Young convention and you get to the blacktail area, it was Chuck Adams, Chuck Adams, Chuck Adams, Chuck Adams, Chuck Adams. I took a video just showing, I'm like, the dude owns the category. Like, it's his category.
Well, it was this time around, but Bob is an avid blacktail hunter, Sitka blacktail in particular, and that's why his handle is Blacktail Bob. And I have the greatest respect for his hunting ability. He's taken more, as I understand it, more Pope and Young Sitka blacktails than I have. He is Alaska resident. He has 2 cabins, one in southern Alaska and one on Kodiak Island. So he really gets after those deer, even in bad winter years. And I tend to bow out on bad winter years because I know the antlers are not as big. But if I think the antlers are decent, I'm always up there.
Yeah. Now, I made the statement not too long ago. And yeah, I don't mean to toot your horn, but I'm going to. I made the statement not too long ago. I said Chuck Adams is the Michael Jordan of bow hunting. And a non-hunter, might I add, was like, I don't know that you could ever say that because billions of people knows who Michael Jordan is. Only bow hunters know who Chuck Adams is. And I said, well, I can make that argument because in the sports world, there's a lot of people who argue for Kobe or LeBron or whoever else to be the best. I said, but really, it's kind of undisputed that Chuck is the best. I'm like, you look at every category that Pope and Young has as to who could be the best bow hunter, and Chuck is at the top of the list of each 9 of those categories. Most animals overall, most world records, every category, Chuck's at the top of. I said, so it's really undisputed. I mean, I'm on the phone with the greatest bow hunter to ever walk the planet, and to kill 3 world records in one trip, that kind of just seals the deal.
Well, you're very kind to say that. I don't pay much attention to accolades and whatnot. I just hunt for the enjoyment of hunting and the challenge of hunting. But every once in a while, somebody will come up and tell me, well, you've got this or you've got that. And then somebody just absolutely humbles me like you just did. And it makes me feel really good. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome, Chuck. I call it a distinct honor to consider the greatest bow hunter to ever live one of my friends, and I'll toot that horn all day long. So, kudos to you. But you also had other animals on the awards. Now, for those of you guys who don't understand what I mean by awards, it is an incredible honor to have one animal invited to the Pope and Young panel, because what that means is in those 2 years, you were the largest of any 5 animals in that category. So typical whitetail deer, hard-horned, that's a category. So that would mean you were the largest. You were one of the 5 largest animals in that 2 years taken. So to have a single animal invited to panel is a crazy honor. Chuck had how many total animals invited to panel?
I had 7 invited this year.
And so 4 of those were blacktails, or 5 of those were blacktails?
Actually, 6 were blacktails. 3 from the typical category, including my world record from 2021, and then 3 from the non-typical category, which I shot last year, which includes the one beside me here. Then I had a bison, a Wyoming bison. That got the number 2 award.
Wow. Yeah, somebody made the comment like, dude, it was super funny because Chuck walked up on stage and then walked back around and walked back up and walked back around and walked back up. And one time he just stayed there and they just kept handing him awards. And I'm like, well, I'll never have that problem. But what about so what was the bison hunt? Where was it? You said it was Wyoming. And that was 2021, if I remember right.
That was 2022, actually.
2022. Okay.
And it was last year. And Wyoming bison are recognized by Pope and Young as fair chase, and I promise you they are. I hunted for days and days and days in October after elk and antelope and mule deer were over in Wyoming. And I only saw 2 bull bison the whole hunt, and I was out there all day long.
Wow.
They typically live in national parks like Glacier National Park, and then they'll drift out onto the national forest every once in a while. But there are a lot of outfitters that hunt that country, and the bison, especially a 10-year-old trophy bull, they know all about where those lines are. And so you don't get them wandering out very often. And I just kept watching and watching and watching until the only 2 I saw came wandering into the open zone. And I threw on my pack and grabbed my Barrel Alaskan compound bow and went into heavy timber, because these animals don't stay out in the open like you think plains animals once did. They're in the heavy timber a lot. I went through the heavy timber, and there was about 4 inches of snow on the ground. And I got to the far edge where I knew there was a little meadow, and I thought maybe they'd be feeding because it was in the evening. And I walked up to the last little pine tree between me and that meadow And here was one of those bison 3 yards away from me on the other side. And I thought, whoa, what am I going to do? I couldn't get a shot. I could just see his horns bobbing up and down. And I was about to back off, and I heard a noise to my left. And here came that other buffalo, except he was coming around my side of that little pine tree.
Oh
And
my
as you
gosh.
know, Dylan, bison are dangerous. Yellowstone Park
Yeah.
has incidents with bison every year. I thought, man, this guy could hook me and hurt me. So I lifted my right hand and just waved at him, just slowly. And his eyes got big and he recoiled and he ran away. And the bison in front of me ran the other way and stopped out in the open at 25 yards, and I nailed him. That was a
Wow.
really exciting trip.
How long did that hunt? How long were you on that hunt?
It was 10 or 12 days, I suppose. Yeah, I'd have to go back to my notes, but it was a while for sure.
So,
And then the work began.
yeah.
My friend Ron Najalik and his nephew Sam, who's a big beefy guy, and Sam's son drove for a couple hours to where I was, and we started butchering and sledding out meat on the snow with a couple big plastic sleds I had, and it took all night to get that buffalo out. Thank goodness for good friends, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's that one animal that you just happened to stumble into? You know, we can't say that about the blacktails. You hunted those ridiculously hard. But what's that one
Right.
animal where you're just like, he was the first deer I saw of the week, and I shot him, and he was giant. Because there are people who just stumble into one. Most of the time, they come with incredible amount of work and discipline and hanging in there. And but what's that one for you that just happened?
Well, Dylan, 5 of my 7 Pope and Young world records have been. You never plan something like that, but I've at least had an inkling that I might be able to
Right.
find a animal big enough. The Sitka deer is one. The mountain caribou in the Northwest Territories of Canada. I broke the world record in 1995. I hunted 10 years straight to try to break that world record, so that was not a total accident. 3 of the world records are Sitka deer. Bison, I've had the world record once on bison in the year 2000. So the 2 that I just stumbled into were Cow's whitetail typical in Arizona in 1989. I hunted with my old friend, the late Larry Heathington, on that trip because he had an access to some good country. And I was just looking for a good solid 90 or 100-inch deer. And I saw this buck, and I didn't know enough about Cow's deer to know what I was looking at, but I stalked him and got him. And when I got Larry and he went back, he was speechless when he saw the deer hanging in the juniper tree. This deer are little, so I could hoist it up by myself and hang it where it could cool. It scored 110 and 5/8. Boone and Crockett minimum is 110, so that was a world record with Pope and Young for a while. Total accident.
Wow.
My world record Yellowstone or American elk from the year 2000 was also an accident. I mean, nobody finds a 409 point elk on purpose. I just happened to be in the right spot at the right time the year before. I saw that elk. I already had filled my tag. I was mule deer hunting, and I was blown away by his size. So I went back the next year, and that was delivered. I hunted that area, scoured it, found that elk again, obviously the same bull, and eventually managed to bag him. But I mean, that's just pure luck. You don't find an animal that big on purpose.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask is because, going back to the point I made earlier is everybody wants to hunt these giant animals and they want to kill a giant, whitetail or elk or whatever it takes. But, they go on an elk hunt for 7 days out of the year and they want to kill a giant. Well, at that point, like, you're just gonna have to find a needle in a haystack and stumble on one. I mean, if that's how you get to hunt, I mean, if you're the kind of guy that you get 2 weekends a year and you're hunting public ground for whitetails in Oklahoma or Missouri, your expectations have to change a little bit. Like, you can't expect to just stumble on a 180. Your expectations have to change, and you have to realize, like, I've only got 2 days to do this, 2 days on a weekend on public ground. You know, I'm gonna have to be happy with a 120 or a 115, whatever it might be. Your expectations might have to change because very rarely does a guy just stumble on a 180 whitetail or a 380 bull. I mean, and even Chuck isn't. That's not a fair assumption to say he stumbled on them because he spends 80% of the year in the field. So if anybody's going to stumble on him, it's going to be the guy who's in the field for 80 days a year, or 80% of the year. I mean, um, but most of the time you got to get out and just grind and work hard and chase after them if that's what you want to do. Um, so Chuck, what has been the number one thing that you have found that when things suck, when things are just horrible, how do you hang in there? What's been that one kind of mental thing that's kept you in that game?
I guess I'm just like a bulldog. I never let go, and my experience over the years has told me that if you never let go, things always turn around eventually, unless you run out of time. And I've run out of time on hunts a lot. I burned my tag or shot a smaller animal for meat, and still had a grin on my face. But things always do turn around, and it'll make your head spin how quick they turn around sometimes. I mean, you beat your head against the wall, beat your head against the wall, miss a shot or blow multiple stalks, and then suddenly everything aligns, and you get the job done. And that's what I would encourage people to do, is just be persistent, never get down. I mean, sure, I get down when I make mistakes, and I kick myself and try to do better the next time. But you can't get too far down, because the animals have every advantage in the sport, and uh, us bow hunters have every disadvantage. And so,
Right.
what might seem like a mistake, it's not really a mistake a lot of the time. It's just that the critter got the upper hand.
Yeah. Well, and our mutual friend Fred Eichler, he talks about and he puts it in a really cool perspective. Um, a lot of guys want to give up on day 5, day 6, day 7. They haven't seen any animals. They haven't even found the elk. They haven't even found the bears. They're ready to give up and throw it in. But Fred says, he's like, dude, if I haven't seen any elk, I've got more of a chance on day 8 than I did on day 1. So it's not that I lose hope, it's that my hope keeps building. Like, I keep getting more excited because, sure, it's day 7 and I haven't even found elk yet, but now today my chances are better for finding elk than they were day 1 because I've weeded out areas and I know they're not over here, so I can try over here now. And so my chances keep increasing. They're not going down. Things aren't getting worse as we go. They're getting better as we go. And so that's a really cool way to look at it, in my opinion.
It sure is. And Fred's an upbeat guy and a very successful bow hunter and a very successful outfitter. And I'm sure he's been very frustrated with some of his clients who did want to give up. We've talked about that, Fred and I, a little bit over the poker table. And
Yeah.
uh, the people who, the old saying, 80% of success is just showing up. It was never truer than it is with bow hunting. If you're not out
Right.
there hammering away, you're not going to see the animal.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Now I'm also a big proponent. I tell guys all the time, like, when you start to get burned out and you start to just feel miserable and hate it, like, take a day. Like, take a day break, go come off the mountain and, if you're on an elk hunt, come off the mountain and go grab a hot meal and a shower at a truck stop and then go back up on the mountain. Like, take that day to just, recharge the batteries and get your mind right. And Perfect example. I was on a bear hunt one time, and we were in Idaho in the back country, and we just weren't finding bears, and we were putting in so much time and so many miles, and I mean, it was just a hard hunt. And I was like, this sucks. This is miserable. So rather than giving up and going home, let's drive down the mountain, grab a hot burger and fries. We'll get a shower and we'll get cleaned up, and then we'll come back. And literally when we get back, we find bears. And it was just that's all I needed. I needed one day to just mentally reset, take a break, go fishing. I casted a line and went fishing and caught some trout. But that's all I needed was just one day to just reset the batteries, to take a break and get back in the game. So don't be afraid to do that either, though, to hang in there longer, because it will prove itself to be beneficial.
That's great advice, Dylan. As a matter of fact, on my Sitka deer hunt last August, there was one day where the first half, the morning through about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, was rotten weather and fog, and you couldn't see past your nose hardly. And then it cleared up. But I had been pounding it for day after day after day. And I said, you know what? I can't get that far from camp with what I have left of this day. I'm just going to relax in the tent and read on another book and recharge my batteries. And the next day I went out, and I believe that was the 16th day. And on the 17th, I shot my second buck. So,
Yeah.
And I felt guilty about it, to be honest, that I didn't just jump out and go hunting again, but I was pretty thrashed. So I just took a break.
Sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes, even the best of sports players have to come out and take a breather every once in a while. And it makes you more beneficial. And I equate it to, I told one guy this. He was a big beefy guy, and you could tell he hits the gym all the time. And I'm like, dude, you want all these gains in the gym, but sometimes the best way to get gains is to take a day off, to find rest so your body can recoup and rejuvenate. So the same is true with hunting. We want to find all this success, and sometimes we just think, well, if I just keep going, I'll have better chances. But your mind is fatigued, your body's fatigued, you're tired, you're not mentally in the game. And when we take that day off, or even a few hours, but when we take that break and we just, mentally reset, physically reset, man, it'll make the last 4 or 5, 7 days way better than if we just try to stay in it and grind it out.
That's a great attitude. It really is.
Guys, not knowing the law is not an excuse for breaking the law. And sometimes going through different state agency websites, they're clunky, they're hard to get around, they're hard to understand, they're not laid out well. They're just difficult. And for guys, especially who hunt multiple states, you're bouncing between states, you're going different places. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with season dates, bag limits, laws, rules, regulations. SeasonReport.com is your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about every state you hunt in. You can save the counties that you hunt in inside your portfolio, and then you can look at everything on a calendar view. So I can see when the season's open and close in Oklahoma and Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas. I can see when all those season dates are open, when they overlap with rifle season, so I know when I got to throw my orange on. I can see everything on one easy-to-use, easy-to-understand platform, but also every rule, law, regulation, it's right there. I don't have to go through the state clunky agency websites. It's all right there in one place for me to look at. Easy to understand, easy to follow. Guys, this is something that it saves me every year. I check I check it out every year. I look at it before every hunt to make sure, something didn't open or close that I didn't know about. Guys, this entire platform is just $10 for the entire year. It's the best $10, in my opinion, that you can spend on hunting and making sure that you're covered as far as the law goes. Guys, use code Hunting101. That's all caps Hunting101, and get that entire platform for just $10 for the entire year. I would highly, highly encourage it. Again, it's the best $10 that I believe you can spend in a season. So, Chuck, one thing that I do want to talk about that I admire immensely about you. You posted that picture in your tent on the hunt that we're talking about, where you were in the tent for, crazy amounts of hours. You posted a picture and you could see all the clothes hanging around you. And I saw that picture posted on a forum, and the caption was, you don't have to spend 10 grand on Sitka to be successful, or 15 grand on QU, or whatever it might be. You don't have to spend all this ungodly amount of money to be successful. And so I look at that and I'm thinking, man, Chuck's using some old t-shirts, some old clothing, and he's using a Bear Alaskan, which is one of the best shooting bows ever, in my opinion. And that's a $550 bow. And some of these guys, they think, well, I've got to buy this bow, and I've got to put these sights and these stabilizers and this quiver, and all of a sudden they've got a $3,000 setup, and they're shooting deer at 20 yards from a tree stand. That's all they hunt. But they've been sold on this idea that they have to have that equipment. They have to have that gear. So I admire that greatly about you, that you don't, when I watch you, it's not, you're not decked out in $30,000 worth of gear, toting around a $5,000 bow. Man, you're out there killing world records with a $550 bow.
Well, one reason I really enjoyed being affiliated with Bear Archery is Bear Archery makes great products at a reasonable price. You don't have to mortgage your house to go get set up to shoot a deer. And the Alaskan's a fine bow. Like you say, it's about $550 retail. That sucker, I can hit my thumbnail at 20 yards with that bow. What more do I need? It's quiet, it's fast, and it's accurate. And I have nothing against Sitka gear or QU gear, but I do just fine with. I'd rather spend my money on the hunt rather than a big assemblage of equipment. Let's me take one more bush plane trip in Alaska, or buy a couple more paperback books, and so money's important.
I've had so many guys. I went on an elk hunt last year, and I literally have a guy sitting here talking to me saying, man, I wish I could afford to go on an elk hunt. And I'm like, dude, you're wearing all Sitka and carrying a $3,000 bow. Like, you could. You just spend all your money on gear to shoot deer. Like, man, you think back and you're like, dude, what about the Indians who carved their bows and found sharp rocks to put on wooden arrows, and they were successfully harvesting deer? But yet we think that we have to have this $4,000 bow, and each arrow we sling costs $35. And I mean, why not put that money towards hunting more? Like, I like to hunt, so why not save my money on all the gear and go hunt more?
I agree. The one place where I don't skimp at all is optics. The more you pay, the better optics you generally get, and I don't skip on that because I hunt with my eyes. In a lot, Sitka deer is a good example. I'm glassing 90% of the time, and so good optics, both spotting scope and binocular are essential. But a lot of the other stuff, it's smoke and mirrors. You really don't need it. When I got my Super Slam finally with the bow in 1990, one of my good friends in my hometown in California said, I don't understand how you can do this. How can you afford this? Well, the prices were a lot lower then, obviously, for hunts. But I always went on do-it-yourself hunts when it was legally possible. But old Bill asked me that, and I said, well, we were standing in his front yard. I said, you see that motorhome over there you just bought? It's a matter of priorities. I'm driving my 10-year-old pickup truck, my old Toyota, and I spent the amount of money you spent on that motorhome to go on 3 or 4 hunts. So a lot of it is just priorities.
Absolutely. That's, man, I have said it multiple times. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. I'm like, don't tell me you wish you could afford to go on an elk hunt when you smoke cigarettes. Like, I'm just saying, because if you quit that and put it in a jar at the end of the year, you can afford an elk hunt. Like, but again,
right.
It's all priorities. It's all, I mean, and it goes back to that whole idea. Like, I want to kill bigger animals, but are you really willing to do what it takes to kill big animals? And guys, if you've listened to this show more than once, you know that I'm not a Chuck Adams. I don't care to shoot the biggest and best animals. Like, I like to kill stuff. So I'll put an arrow through whatever I see. That's how I am. But my mindset is this. I want to be able to hunt whitetails in Kansas and Oklahoma and Missouri and Arkansas and Texas. I want to be able to do that every year. So to do that, like, I'm going to have to keep driving my 2008 Silverado. I'm going to have to keep liability insurance on it. Those are types of things that I save on so that I can then put in a jar to say, okay, I now have more money to hunt in more states this year. That's just what I have to do. Man, I wanted to go on an elk hunt last year. So I went through and I sold 2 guns like that. I went through my closet and I found 2 guns and I sold them so I could afford to go on an elk hunt. That's it. That's my priority. So, you have to figure those things out and what's important to you if you want to do it.
Right. I've never been one to say that shooting big animals is necessarily important. It depends on your mindset. I go after big animals because it lets me hunt more and kill less. Uh, uh, to be honest with you, on Kodiak Island, some days I was seeing 35 or 40 bucks in a single day. And
Wow.
I probably could have filled my tags, all 3 of them, in one day if I had wanted to. And I don't say that lightly because my old buddy Ron Najalik and I went to Kodiak a few years ago, and I kept looking for a big deer that never showed up. Ron shot a bomber that was a top Pope and Young Award winner during that period. I couldn't find a big deer to save my life, and I told Ron with 3 days left in the hunt, I'm going to go out and fill my tags, and he kind of chuckled. I went out the next day and I shot all 3 of my deer, all Pope and Youngs, not huge, but all Pope and Youngs, in that single day. And then the next 2 days, we hadn't seen bears in the area, or I wouldn't have done it, but they were down low in the salmon streams. Next 2 days, it was a grueling meat pack, but it could be done. But if I had done that on day 1, I wouldn't have, of that hunt or any other hunt, I wouldn't have had any more fun.
Wow.
And so I trophy hunt so I can hunt more. That's the reason. And I also am self-employed, which allows me, unlike some folks, I'm self-employed, so I can work my butt off during the off times, 70, 80 hours a week, try to get ahead, which I'm doing right now, so I can go spend time in places like Kodiak.
Well, Chuck, if you ever need somebody to come along and just shoot the ones you want to pass, I can do that. I can be that guy. I'll take the bullet. That'll be my cross to bear. I am excited. We are headed to Liberty Ranch, which is one of my favorite places on earth. We're headed there in December, and we're gonna hunt whitetails together, and it's gonna be an absolute blast. I can't wait. I can't wait to just sit and share camp with Chuck Adams. But I'm just gonna sit with you though, and every big deer that walks by that you says, not big enough, I'll put an arrow in him for you.
Okay, that works for me. I actually think I'm going to hunt with bear mag riser takedown recurve on that trip just for the fun of it. I started bow hunting with recurve bows, and I had a bear mag riser recurve many years ago, and I've got one now, and I think I'm going to use that 50-pound bow on that trip. Now, so maybe you'll have an advantage with your bear compound.
I'll take my bear recurve too. If you're going to hunt with a recurve, I will too.
Okay.
Okay. How often?
Right.
How often
Sounds
do you
good.
pick up a recurve and hunt with one? Do you go on many hunts with recurves?
I don't. The industry, particularly the magazine industry, wants me to write about contemporary products, and that's mostly compound bows. So I hunt primarily with compound bows, but I inventoried my bows the other day. I have over 30 recurves and longbows, including my favorite Wing Thunderbird bow from back in the late 1960s and early 70s. And I pick them up. I've got a 20-yard indoor range here in my basement, so I shoot them at targets periodically, and I love it. I love finger shooting because I think I'm pretty good at it, and I just feel really connected with the arrow with my fingers. But uh, it's all good. I love shooting a release 8 and a compound bow too.
Yeah. No, that's something that I've really gotten into is traditional archery. And I'm kicking myself because I gave away my first 2 recurves. As I upgraded, I gave those away. And now looking back, I'm like, man, recurves are such a piece of art that I'll never give another one away. I've got bows and it's sad, but I've got buddies come in here and there's recurves hanging all over the place, and they're like, "Hey, what would you want for one?" And I'm like, "Dude, I'm not selling any of them because it's such an art. Like, they're all different. They're all, each tip is a little bit, it's sanded down just a little bit differently, and each grip is a little bit different, and they're all just an absolute work of art. And so, I love recurves, man. They're beautiful. They're fun to shoot. They're challenging. I love them.
So I'm in the same boat with you, Dylan. Back in my college days when I was looking under the bed for dimes to buy lunch, I sold 2 bear recurves that I wish I had back. I had an old HC 300 target bow that I shot in college competitively. That was just a gorgeous bow, 32-pound draw. I mean, it was great. And then the Mag Riser recurve from Bear. I sold both of those because I needed the money, and I've been kicking myself ever since. Because in the long run, it probably wouldn't have made that much difference.
Yeah.
Uh, and I tried to get the HC 300 back. The lady I sold it to, who was a target archer, she left it in her car, and it was stolen out of her car the week after I sold it to her. So it was long gone. It just broke my heart.
Oh, that makes me sick. The worst part about
Yeah.
archery stuff being stolen is that most likely the person who stole it has no idea the value, has no idea the stories it could tell, has no idea where it's been, what it's seen, what it's done. Whereas if I were to give my dad a bow, if I were to say, "Dad, I want you to have this bow," he'll forever be able to say, "Man, my son shot a deer in Missouri with this bow." Uh, he could tell the stories of the bow. He knows the history of the bow. Whereas if some guy just walks by and picks it up and says, "Oh yeah, this looks like it's probably worth something," they have no idea what they have. They have no idea what they've taken. Um, I had a buddy and he got a knife stolen, and it was given to him by his great grandfather, and so and it was a very valuable knife. But the guy that stole it, he doesn't know any of that stuff. To him, it looked expensive, so he took it. And that has always been like my biggest pet peeve. If somebody steals a truck, they can figure out, what it's worth and sell it for that. But man, some of these bows, they have so much history and so much, you know, stories they could tell that you can never put a price tag on them. And sometimes it just really sucks to see it happen like that.
I agreed. Uh, I shot, as I shot a Bear Alaskan bow back in the 70s when Bear came out with their.
Didn't you shoot
It's
your
kind
first
of
Pope and
funny to
Young
think
animal with
about
that?
now. They're 49-inch axle to axle finger compound. I shot my first Pope and Young animal with that bow, a Canada moose, uh, and uh, and I shot some deer with it, and I still have that bow hanging on my wall. And like you say, there's the history attached to that isn't worth anything to anybody else, but it
Yeah,
sure is to me.
right. Um, Chuck, I want to talk real quick about Pope and Young, because we've talked a lot about Pope and Young, and in this episode. And for those of you who don't know, Bear and Pope and Young work really closely together. They're proud partners of each other. Bear's a proud supporter of Pope and Young. Um, why should people be members of Pope and Young? because the reason I ask is because so many people just think, well, I'm never going to shoot world records. I'm never going to shoot giant animals. So Pope and Young's really not for me, which couldn't be further from the truth. So why should people join Pope and Young, Chuck?
Well, Dylan, I probably told you before, but the audience might not have heard it. I didn't enter animals for a number of years in Pope and Young. And then my old friend Jim Doherty, who was president of the Pope and Young for an extended period of time back in the 70s and 80s, he said, "Why aren't you entering these animals?" And I said, "Well, I hunt for, like I said earlier, I hunt for fun. I hunt for challenge. Why should I?" And he said, it gives everybody else something to shoot for. It lets everybody else know what other bow hunters are doing. So there's a benchmark. And I thought about that and didn't think about it too long and entered all my critters. And I've been entering them ever since. And the record book does get, if you're competitive, gives you something to strive for, like the non-typicals that I deliberately went after last year. Or it just tells you that, wow, the whitetail I just shot is a pretty good one, because he makes Pope and Young. Maybe he's a 135 or 140 deer, and that's good. And without the record book, all you'd have is a few anecdotal statements by taxidermists and other people to say it's a nice deer or not. And so it kind of solidifies things to have the record book. Everybody should enter their animals, in my opinion, for that reason, to do me a favor.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the number one resource for conservation and for bow hunting in North America. Just 2 years ago when those certain counties in Georgia were looking at banning bow seasons, Pope and Young sent their data in and sent their record books in to show all the conservation numbers and animals that were harvested and all of those things. And they were just used in Russia to prove the legality, the lethality of hunting big game with archery equipment. They were used in Greenland. And so these numbers, they're not just to say, well, look at me, I'm such a great bow hunter. Those numbers are needed. If take Kansas, for instance, I always use that as an example because that's where I'm from. But, if Kansas were to say, hey, we're going to go to a 2-buck state, you can kill 2 bucks now. Well, in 5 years, they're going to want to look at some sort of data to see how those numbers have affected the antler size and the maturity of these animals. And so they're going to pull the Pope and Young record book datas over those 5 years to see if antler sizes went up and went down. How is it doing for the bucks and for the herd? And so we need your entries, but we also need you to be a member. We need you to join Pope and Young because there's power in numbers. And every week there's something coming across the Pope and Young desks where voices are needed, where they need us to step in and make a case for, bow hunting seasons or legal things. Should we allow cellular trail cameras? Should we allow, range finding sites? Should we allow, you name it? And they need somebody to step in. Should we allow, here's a big one, should we allow muzzle loaders to expand their season into archery seasons? Should we allow crossbows all archery season long? And that's where Pope and Young steps in and we say, hey, we represent X amount of bow hunters and we can't support this. So as a member, there's power in numbers. So what's more important if we stand up and say, hey, we represent 5,000 bow hunters, or hey, we represent 500,000 bow hunters, and this you can't take away our season. You can't do that. Another thing is, Chuck, a lot of people think that the record book is just to show off. It's just to show how good you are. And that animal deserves to be in a book amongst its peers. It deserves to be honored with the rest of the biggest animals taken in North America with archery equipment. But also, the record book exists for the very purpose to prove that archery is a legitimate means of harvesting big game animals. In 1960, a lot of these states didn't allow archery seasons. And so Glenn St. Charles and Harv Ebers and their group of friends, they got together and started pulling this data to be able to take it to different states and show, hey, look, there were X amount of big game animals, mature big game animals harvested in Arkansas last year. So you being Missouri, you should open an archery season. So many of you live in states that have bow seasons because of the work that Pope and Young did through the record book. And so, guys, I would highly encourage you to become a member. It's $45 a year. And going back, for guys who, you spend $5,000 on camo and $2,000 on a bow, to not say I'm going to spend $45 a year so that I can protect my rights, so that I can continue to do this, so that my kids can do this when they're older, so my grandkids can do this. How could you not? How could you not say I'm going to invest $45 a year? That way I can help ensure my rights as a bow hunter. Another thing that a lot of you might not know is that anytime you buy a new Bear bow, all you got to do is register that bow, and you're going to get a free Pope and Young membership. That's how much Bear believes in what Pope and Young does. When you buy a new bow, if you register that bow, Bear is going to pay for your first year membership to Pope and Young. And so, guys, I would highly encourage you to check it out as an organization, because it's not just a record book. It's not just a look how good I am, I killed X amount of animals. We need Chuck's numbers, but we need your numbers as well. We need to be able to show that data to different states and different legislators to prove archery as a legitimate means of harvesting big game animals.
And I want to give a shout out to my boyhood hero, Fred Bear, as it relates to what you just said, Dylan. Fred Bear put bow hunting on the map by proving that an arrow can drop any critter in North America and around the world. And he was right in there pushing for bow hunting seasons because the arrow was lethal, and he proved it. And so we all owe a debt of gratitude to the late, great Fred Bear for what he did for our sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was a massive supporter of Pope and Young, a massive supporter. In fact, the Fred Bear Trust Fund is named Fred Bear because he made the first donation into the trust fund for Pope and Young. And so, guys, again, I would just highly encourage you to check it out. Look into it at least. You owe it to yourself as a bow hunter. Doesn't matter if you've ever had a book in an animal in the books. Doesn't matter if you ever plan on getting any animals in the books. You should become a member because it's helping to protect your rights as a bow hunter. Chuck, what's that one tip that tip that you've got that the listener can take and make themselves a better hunter with?
I think we've already touched on it, Dylan. Persistence more than anything else. You might not be the world's best shot. You might not be the world's best hunter. You might not have the best luck in the world, but if you are persistent, if you never say never and keep hammering away and spend as much time's one of the keys, spend as much time as you can trying to get the animal you want, sooner or later it will work out. And if you bail on that project, I guarantee it won't work out because you're bailing because you haven't succeeded yet.
Yeah. I did want to ask you, when you're in a place like Alaska, or Oregon, or, you're hunting anywhere where it's damp and wet, how do you keep your equipment functioning well? Like, what's that tip that you've got that can keep your bow working well, keep your bow dry? Maybe it's keeping yourself dry. But how do you stay with all of your gear functioning well when you're in a damp environment like that?
Well, I do wear outer shells in wet weather. I don't like to hunt in the rain because everything does get soaked sooner or later. But you do what you have to do. If you've got a pretty much bomb-proof and weatherproof bow like the Bear Alaskan, I don't worry about it getting wet. That sucker was soaked the whole time I was in Alaska, and it performed fine. Back in the day when limbs were like the recurve limbs we have today, were laminated with wood cores, it could have been a problem, but modern compounds don't have that problem anymore. I stay as dry as I can, and if it's raining too much, I have friends in hunting camps that say, man, I got to go out and hunt. And I said, well, I'll see you later. And I kick back until the weather improves, because you could thrash around in really wet weather forever and not get the job done, and then go out in 2 hours after it clears up and shoot an animal. So I like to stay out of it if I don't absolutely have to be in the bad weather. And then I wear waterproof shells over my inner garments, and I try to dry off my equipment. Release aid, tab I keep in if I'm finger shooting, tabs in a plastic baggie in my pocket until it's time to actually shoot in wet weather. But that doesn't happen very much anymore with the modern bows and the release aids.
Do you do anything to your equipment as far as like rust prevention or water retention? Of course, wax your string so your string doesn't hold water. But do you do anything else to like limb bolts or anything to keep stuff rust prevented?
I carry a container of Hoppy's gun oil, which is a low viscosity oil, and I will oil everything. I'll bet during 29 days on Kodiak last year, I oiled all the steel parts on my Bear Alaskan 10 or 12 times. I dry everything off, and then I make sure there's oil on it, because it probably wouldn't hurt it in most cases, unless it's moving part thing like a arrow rest. Probably wouldn't hurt anything. I just object to the look of rust on any steel part on a bow.
Yeah. What rest do you shoot on that Alaskan?
I'm shooting one of the Bear dropways.
Gotcha.
Works great. Yeah.
Now, that's one thing. My favorite part about the Alaskan is just the simplicity. Nothing on that bow is overcomplicated. Mm-hmm. Nothing on that bow moves unless it has to. A lot of these bows today, there's so many moving parts and so many arms that swing, and you've got all these different cable systems now that do all these crazy different things, and that Bear Alaskan just keeps everything streamlined and simple. Makes it easier to work on, makes it easier in the field if something does happen. It's just a simple bow, but it's a flat out stinking shooter. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. I've always had the philosophy that simple and dependable is better. And that completely describes the Bear Alaskan bow. Easy to work on. When mine came in, the draw length was an inch too long for me. I got out my Allen wrench and had it back down where I wanted it in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
The draw weight didn't change during that process, and it tuned up like a dream. So I agree. Simple and dependable, better. Actually, the drop way I'm shooting is from Trophy Ridge. I said Bear, but Trophy Ridge and Bear are so tightly aligned that I think of it as the same company, actually.
How do you tune your bows? What kind of process do you go through to tune your bows?
I shoot through paper. And unlike what a lot of folks do, I don't shoot through paper with fletching. What I do is weigh my fletching and then use a Bear shaft with an electrical tape wrapped around the fletching area that weighs exactly the same as my fletching. Therefore, there's no steerage on that arrow at all, but the front of center balance and the weight out of the bow are exactly the same. So when I get bullet holes, and I mean real bullet holes with a shaft like that, the thing is, it's vibrating a little bit, but it's almost a straight bullet hole through paper. When I get the bullet holes at 3 different distances, I usually shoot at 6 feet and 12 feet and 20 feet. And when I get bullet holes at all 3 distances through stretched butcher paper, I am tuned. And the fletched arrows with the drop away type rest or any good clearance rest, they're going to hit the same place and just fly like a dart.
So how are you tuning? Are you tuning off the rest? Do you just move your rest in and out, or do you, what are you doing to get that to achieve that?
I do multiple things because of the release aid, you have a tied-in loop. It's a little more difficult to move that around. So I tend to move the rest up or down to eliminate porpoising of the arrow, and then I'll move the rest in and out to clear up any fishtailing problems. But I also dig around and make my arrows a little shorter to make them stiffer, a little longer. I play around with it and discard a few shafts in the tuning process, so I don't have to do anything crazy with the arrow rest or that tied-in loop. And I'll move my draw weight up and down a bit too to facilitate the same thing. And you just ease into that sweet spot where your bullet holes are in the paper, and the arrow's hitting in vertical line with your sight pins. And when you get that together, you can't get any better accuracy.
Yes, that is brilliant in my opinion. Now, for those of you wondering why he weighs out and puts tape on the back, which Chuck, it's funny. The reason I said yes like that, I actually just put out a tip. I just recorded a tip on that very topic, because what happens is when you add weight to the back of your arrow, you're stiffening your spine. So if you get that perfect bullet hole, and I mean perfect bullet hole, then by adding the weight of a wrap and fletchings, you're actually going to make that arrow just a bit too stiff. So then if you were to shoot again, you would actually have a stiff tear. So by tuning with that weight already on the back of your arrow, that eliminates that. It eliminates the I had a perfect bullet hole. Why am I now stiff? Well, because it's you added weight to the back of your arrow. Adding weight to the front of your arrow weakens your spine. Adding weight to the back of your arrow stiffens your spine. So
Bingo.
Beautiful. That's a great tip that you shared there, Chuck. Every time I actually just had a guy, I built him some arrows, and he showed up and I handed him 11 arrows and he said, I thought I gave you 12. And I said, yeah, here's your 12th. And it had a wrap and then it had a piece of tape around it. And he's like, what is that for? And I said, well, that's the exact same weight as your other arrows, but it's so you can bare shaft tune your bow. And dude's eyes were just like, I never even would have thought about that. Like, wow, it's incredible. So fantastic tip there on tuning your bows. Chuck, man,
straight bare shaft tuning is bogus because of what you said. Your arrow with a bare shaft is nose heavy compared to the fletched arrow, and it's weaker compared to the fletched arrow.
Right.
And that makes all the difference. You might miss a deer because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Or guys, listen, the importance of tuning your arrow. Here's the importance. It's easier to poke a hole through a piece of paper if you go straight in. It's really hard to poke a hole through a piece of paper if it hits like this. So if your arrow is hitting your deer just stiff, you're not getting the penetration that if it was just driving straight in. If I have to go get a shot at the doctor and they're going to try to stab me like this, I'm going to be mad at them because it's going to hurt worse. They're going to be pushing more flesh away than they have to. That's why your doctor goes straight in with the needle and straight out with the needle. So by getting that and achieving that perfect arrow flight, you'll get better penetration because it'll be flying straight through the deer rather than hitting the deer at an angle and then having to correct itself before it goes through. Phenomenal tip there, Chuck. Thank you so much. Chuck, where can they find you at, my friend?
I'm on social media, Instagram and Facebook at Chuck Adams Archery official. We got hacked, as you know, about a year and a half ago, and we went from Chuck Adams Archery to Chuck Adams Official. And then I have a website, chuckadamsarchery.com.
Guys, I would highly encourage you to get Chuck's books. Phenomenal reads. Go check him out on social media. If you just want to watch giant animals dying, Chuck's the place to be following and to be watching. Guys, I know. Cheap, interchangeable blade knives, they're all in the rage. Change your blade right there, and you can keep going. And it's cool, and I have one in my bag, and I like to keep one in my bag. However, there is no replacement for a well-built, hand-forged knife, something that I know is dependable, it's strong. If I pick it up, it's going to be sharp, it's going to be ready to go. These right here are knives built by my good friend Nick Deeker, Nick's Knife Works. And the most beautiful part of this is it's not cut and dry. You don't just pick out a knife and say, well, I guess that's the one I need. No. He built this one specifically to the length that I wanted it. I wanted this to fit right on the side of my binocular harness, so it was always there, always ready for me to grab. He built this one to fit really small in my pocket for an everyday carry. Guys, a good hand-forged knife is worth its weight in gold. Go check out Nick Deeker at nicksknifeworks.com. Thank you so much for coming on, Chuck. Again, huge congratulations from myself. Huge congratulations from Bear Archery and Pope and Young on your new world records, on your awards, on just a phenomenal biannual in the woods.
Well, thank you, Dylan. It's been a pleasure to be with you today. It's always fun doing a podcast with Dylan Ray.
Hey, I try to make it fun, but guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you all have a fantastic week.